For 3 years, I fought for your love. Today I realized I was fighting your family alone.
For 3 years, I fought for your love, she said, her voice steady. Today I finally realized I was fighting your family alone. Minute Jun stood at the microphone, smiling, ready to announce the wedding date. Then Zainab stood up. The room did not understand at first. Some guests thought she was simply adjusting her dress. But she reached up, slid the engagement ring off her finger, and placed it gently on the white table in front of everyone.
Welcome back, everyone, to Afro Love Tips. Thank you so much for helping us reach 1,000 subscribers. Your support means everything. If you're new here, do not forget to subscribe and join our growing family for more amazing content. Now, let's get into today's video.
The first time she met his mother, Madam Han looked her up and down like she was inspecting an unwanted delivery. "So this is the one," she said flatly, not even offering a hand to shake. Zainab smiled through it. She told herself it would take time. It did not get better. It got worse. At the first official family dinner, Madam Han set down her chopsticks and said, loud enough for the entire table to hear, "You should be grateful my son chose you." Forks froze midair. Minute Jun's aunt looked down at her plate. Nobody spoke. Zainab felt her face burn, but she kept her composure. "Excuse me. I'm simply being honest," Madam Han said, sipping her tea as if she had said nothing at all. Minute Jun smiled nervously and quickly changed the subject, asking his father about a golf trip. He did not defend her. He did not even look at her. Later that night, in the car, Zainab finally let the tears fall. "Please ignore her," Minute Jun said gently, reaching for her hand. "She doesn't mean it the way it sounds." "She meant exactly what she said," Zainab whispered. "And you let her say it." He had no answer for that. He simply held her hand tighter, as if silence could replace courage. It became a pattern. Family gatherings where she was seated at the far end of the table. Photos taken without her, to keep things simple, his mother said. Private family events she somehow never received an invitation to. And always, Madam Han finding new ways to praise Korean women in front of her, as if reciting a quiet warning. Haiwan's daughter just got promoted at her father's firm, Madam Han said one evening, smiling at no one in particular. Such a respectable, traditional young woman. Minute Jun's father always said she'd make someone a wonderful wife. Zainab said nothing. She simply gripped her napkin under the table. She stayed. Not because she didn't notice the cruelty, but because she loved him, and love, she believed, was supposed to be patient. She told herself that if she endured long enough, his family would eventually see what he saw in her. She did not yet understand that the real wound wasn't his mother's words. It was his silence. But before we continue, if you enjoy emotional betrayal and revenge stories packed with shocking twists, hit like, subscribe, and comment revenge below. She remembered calling her sister in Lagos that night, whispering into the phone so Minute Jun wouldn't hear. "Maybe I'm overreacting," she said. "Are you happy?" her sister asked simply. "I love him," Zainab said. That wasn't the question. She didn't answer. She told herself love would be enough to outlast anything his family threw at her. She had survived worse battles building her career from nothing in a new country. She could survive a difficult mother-in-law. What she didn't yet understand was that this wasn't a battle she could win alone, because the person who should have been fighting beside her kept stepping quietly out of the room every time the fighting started. The wedding planning began not long after, and it was meant to be the happiest chapter of her life. Instead, it became the moment everything started to unravel completely. Zainab had imagined her wedding for years. A celebration of two cultures meeting, Nigerian fabrics woven beside Korean hanbok, her mother's favorite songs played alongside traditional piebark customs. She presented the plan to Minute Jun with excitement, spreading swatches of fabric across his kitchen table. "It's beautiful," he said, kissing her forehead. "My mother will love it." His mother did not love it. Within 2 weeks, Zainab discovered the wedding planner had quietly removed every trace of her vision. The Nigerian fabrics were gone. Her family's names were missing from the invitation. The menu had been replaced entirely with traditional Korean dishes only. The colors, the music, even the seating chart, all rewritten without her knowledge. "This is supposed to be my wedding too," Zainab said, holding the new invitation with shaking hands. "It's still our wedding," Minute Jun said carefully. "Then why does it look like I don't exist in it?" "This is a Korean wedding," he said. "Let's not fight over small things." Something in her chest cracked at those words. Not because they were cruel, but because they came from him. His mother's insults she had learned to brace against. But this casual dismissal from the man who claimed to love her, cut far deeper. "Small things," she repeated quietly. "My family's names aren't small things, Minute Jun." He sighed, rubbing his temple like she was the difficult one. "Can we just get through this without conflict? Please?" She walked away from that conversation feeling something shift permanently inside her, though she couldn't yet name it. A week later, walking past his mother's study, she overheard a phone call that stopped her cold. After the wedding, Madame Han said into the phone, laughing lightly, "She'll know her place soon enough." Zainab stood frozen in the hallway, her hand pressed against the wall. She didn't move until the call ended. Then she walked to the bathroom, locked the door, and sat on the floor until she could breathe normally again. She began questioning everything. Not just the wedding. The relationship. Herself. It was around this time that Yeojin reappeared. Minute Jun's ex-girlfriend was elegant in the exact way Madame Han admired, soft-spoken, traditionally raised, the daughter of a respected family friend. She arrived at a Han family dinner looking effortlessly perfect, and Madame Han lit up like a woman greeting her long-lost daughter. "Yeojin, sit here, next to me," Madame Han said, patting the chair beside her own, completely ignoring the empty seat beside Zainab. Throughout dinner, the comparisons came one after another. "Yeojin always helps me prepare the side dishes," Madame Han said sweetly. "She knows what a proper home should look like." Zainab smiled and stayed silent, the way she had trained herself to do. But the attacks did not slow down. They multiplied. She began noticing Yeojin's name everywhere, in family group photos, in the wedding planning chats, in casual mentions of weekend visits to the Han household. Visits that happened even when Minute Jun was home. "Why was Yeojin at your parents' house yesterday?" Zainab finally asked. "She's basically family," Minute Jun said, shrugging. "She and my mom have always been close." "That's not what I asked." He didn't answer. That night, unable to sleep, Zainab opened his laptop, left open on the kitchen counter, meaning only to check the wedding venue email. Instead, she found a message thread between Minute Jun and his mother with Yeojin copied in. "Madame Han, Yeojin should have been my daughter-in-law. We both know it. Minute Jun, please stop. This isn't fair to Zainab." For one breath, relief washed over her. He had defended her. Then she scrolled further. Older messages. Messages from months earlier. Messages where Minute Jun sat silently on video calls while his mother and Yeojin laughed about Zainab's accent, her clothing, her inability to understand Korean family values. Message after message where he typed nothing. Said nothing. Simply existed in the room while they tore her apart, piece by piece. He had never told her about these calls. Not once. This wasn't romantic betrayal. It was something colder, an emotional betrayal built entirely from his silence, repeated so many times it became its own kind of cruelty. At this point, would you forgive Minute Jun? Comment forgive or leave below, and let us know what you would have done in Zainab's place. Subscribe and share this video to your families and friends. Zainab closed the laptop slowly. She did not cry this time. Something inside her had gone very quiet, very still, the calm that comes right before a person decides something irreversible. She began gathering everything. Screenshots. Recordings of family dinners she had quietly saved on her phone for months, almost instinctively, as if some part of her always knew she would need proof one day. Emails about the wedding changes. Every message, every insult, every excluded photo. The deeper she dug, the clearer one truth became. The villain in this story had never only been Madam Han. It had always also been the man who sat beside her at every dinner, who held her hand in the car afterward, who whispered apologies instead of standing up, and who let her believe, for 3 long years, that loving her quietly was the same thing as protecting her loudly. She thought of every dinner where she smiled through insults. Every photo she wasn't included in. Every time she told herself, just a little longer, he'll come around. She had spent 3 years rewriting his silence into something gentler than it actually was, because the alternative, admitting the man she loved would never choose her over comfort, was too painful to face. Not anymore. 2 nights later, Zainab asked Minitjan to sit down with her in the living room. No phones. No distractions. Just the truth, finally placed between them. "Did you ever defend me?" she asked quietly. "In 3 years, even once, when your mother or Yojin said something cruel about me, did you ever actually defend me?" Minitjan opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. "Zainab, it's complicated." That's not an answer. He stared at his hands. The silence stretched long enough that it answered the question on its own. "I tried," he finally said. "In my own way." "Your own way was silence," she said. "Your own way was changing the subject. Your own way was asking me to be patient while they humiliated me at every dinner for 3 years." "I love you," he said, his voice breaking. "I believe that you do," she said softly. "But loving me was never the problem, Minitjan, protecting me was. And you never once chose to." For the first time in 3 years, she didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice. Something inside her had simply finished breaking, and what remained was calm, clear, and unshakable. She stopped arguing after that night. Stopped trying to convince his mother to like her. Stopped hoping he would suddenly find courage he had never shown before. She emotionally checked out of the relationship while still wearing the ring, still attending the dinners, still smiling for the cameras, because she had one more thing she needed to do first. The engagement celebration arrived 3 weeks later, bigger than anyone expected. Business partners filled half the guest list. Madam Han had invited every relative, every family friend, every person who needed to witness her son marrying into respectability on her terms. Yojin attended too, seated near the front, glowing in a soft ivory dress that nearly matched a bride's. Nobody in that room knew what Zainab had spent the last 3 weeks doing. She had requested meetings, reviewed contracts, quietly confirmed something Minitjan's father had mentioned once, in passing, months earlier, never imagining she would remember it, that the Han family's company was depending on final approval from a private investment group for a project worth nearly $1 billion. A group Zainab had recently joined as a partner. She said nothing about it to anyone. She simply waited. Madam Han stood at the front of the room, beaming with pride as she welcomed the guests. "Today, we celebrate the joining of 2 families," she announced, raising her glass. Her eyes flicked briefly toward Zainab, then settled, with unmistakable warmth, on Yojin in the front row. Minitjan stepped forward, ring box ready, preparing to announce the wedding date in front of everyone who mattered to his family's reputation. Then Zainab stood. She slid the engagement ring off her finger and placed it gently on the table. The room fell into complete silence. "Zainab, what are you doing?" Minitjan whispered, his face draining of color. She looked around the room slowly, at his mother, frozen mid-smile, at Yojin, confusion spreading across her perfect features, at 200 guests who had spent years watching her be quietly erased and saying absolutely nothing. "For 3 years, I fought for your love," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the silent room. "Today I finally realized I was fighting your family alone. If you've made it this far, you already know what's coming. Like this video right now and subscribe before we continue. You do not want to miss what Zainab says next. Let me tell you what these 3 years actually looked like, she continued, turning slowly toward the head table. I was told to be grateful that your son chose me, as if love were charity. Madam Han's jaw tightened. I was removed from photos, uninvited from family events, and replaced in my own wedding planning without a single conversation. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I sat in this family's home and listened to comparisons designed to make me feel like an outsider in my own engagement. Her eyes moved to Yojin. And I discovered messages, months of them, where the woman I was about to marry into family with, and the man I loved, sat silently while I was mocked for my accent, my culture, and my place in this family. Zainab, please, Minute-Jun said, stepping toward her. I'm not finished, she said, and something in her tone made him stop completely. You didn't betray me because you hated me, she said, looking directly at him now, her voice steady despite the tears finally gathering in her eyes. You betrayed me because protecting me was inconvenient. Because standing up to your mother was uncomfortable. Because choosing me, loudly, in front of people who mattered to you, cost more than you were ever willing to pay. The room had gone completely, devastatingly silent. Guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unable to look away. Madam Han sat frozen, her composure cracking for the first time in 3 years. Minute-Jun stood with tears streaming down his face, unable to speak, unable to defend himself, because there was nothing left to defend.
Everyone in the room expected Zainab to walk away broken. Instead, she reached into her clutch and pulled out a folded document, setting it calmly on the table beside the ring. There's something else you should all know, she said, her voice perfectly composed. 3 months ago, I joined Bright Horizon Partners as a managing partner. She paused, watching confusion ripple across the room. Bright Horizon Partners is the investment group your company has been waiting on for final approval on the Georgia development project. Minute-Jun's father stood up so fast his chair nearly toppled. What did you say? A $1 billion project, Zainab continued, that I personally reviewed last week. I was the swing vote on that approval committee. She looked directly at Madam Han. I was planning to support it. For Minyon Seki. Was planning to. Madam Han repeated, her voice suddenly thin. I withdrew my support this morning, Zainab said simply. The project will not move forward with our group's backing. Silence detonated through the room more violently than any words could have. Minute-Jun's father's face went pale, then red, his hands trembling as the weight of the announcement settled over him. Guests who had come to celebrate a wedding now sat watching a family empire crack open in real time. You can't do this, Madam Han said, rising unsteadily to her feet. Do you understand what you're destroying? I understand exactly what I'm destroying, Zainab said calmly. The same thing you tried to destroy in me for 3 years. The difference is, I'm not doing it out of cruelty. I'm simply no longer willing to build anyone's future at the expense of my own dignity. She turned to the stunned crowd one final time. For 3 years, this family treated me as if I had nothing to offer them but inconvenience. Today you're learning that the woman you dismissed as unworthy was holding your future in her hands the entire time. She picked up her clutch, looked once more at Minute-Jun, who stood frozen, tears streaming silently down his face, no longer the golden son of a respected family but simply a man who had finally run out of silence to hide behind, and walked out of the ballroom without looking back. If this twist shocked you, smash that like button right now and subscribe, because what happens next will leave you speechless. Drop a comment telling us what you think Minute-Jun's family deserves. The fallout was immediate and merciless. Without Bright Horizon's backing, the Georgia project collapsed within weeks, taking several smaller investment partnerships down with it. Minute-Jun's father, once celebrated in business circles for his sharp instincts, watched his company's reputation crumble in boardrooms that had once welcomed him eagerly. Phone calls stopped being returned. Invitations stopped arriving. The respectability Madam Han had spent decades curating evaporated faster than she could explain it away. Within the Han household, the silence became its own kind of punishment. Minute-Jun's father barely spoke to his wife for weeks. Blaming her obsession with appearances for a collapse, he refused to take responsibility for himself. Madame Han, for the first time in her life, found herself without allies. Yojin distanced herself quietly once the family's influence disappeared, proving she had never been loyalty so much as proximity to power. Minute-jun moved out 3 months later. He told his parents he needed space, but the truth was simpler and harder to admit. He could no longer stand to look at his mother across a dinner table without seeing every moment he had failed to defend the only woman who had ever truly loved him. He began therapy, something his family had always quietly mocked as unnecessary for someone of their status. He started small, learning to recognize the pattern in himself, the conflict avoidance disguised as peacekeeping, the silence disguised as loyalty. It was uncomfortable work, and slow, and many nights he sat alone in his new apartment replaying Zainab's words until they stopped sounding like an accusation and started sounding like the truth. He tried calling her. She didn't answer. He tried writing to her. She didn't respond. 8 months after the engagement celebration that ended everything, he finally found her outside a conference center downtown, having just finished speaking on an investment panel. She looked different, not changed exactly, but settled, like a woman who had stopped waiting for permission to take up space in her own life. "Zainab," he said, his voice catching. "Please. Just 5 minutes." She studied him for a long moment before nodding once. They sat on a bench outside the building, the city moving busily around them as if nothing monumental was happening at all. "I know I don't deserve this conversation," Minute-jun began, his hands shaking slightly. "I've spent 8 months trying to understand what I did to you, and to myself, and his voice cracked. "I am sorry. For all of it. The dinners. The wedding. The messages. I should have stopped the moment they started. I should have chosen you, loudly, every single time, and I didn't, and I will regret that for the rest of my life." Zainab listened without interrupting, her expression calm, unreadable. "I've changed," he continued. "I left the company. I barely speak to my mother. I'm trying to become someone who would have actually deserved you back then. I know it's too late, but I needed you to know that." When he finally finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Your mother insulted me," she said softly. "Your family rejected me at every turn. But the person who broke my heart was you." He flinched as if struck. "Every time they hurt me," she continued, her voice steady but trembling at the edges, "I looked at you, waiting for you to say something. Anything. And every time, Minute-jun, you looked away." Tears spilled freely down his face now, but he didn't try to argue. There was nothing left to argue. "I forgive you," she said finally, surprising him. "Not because you deserve it, but because carrying that anger has cost me enough already." She stood slowly, smoothing her coat. "But forgiveness isn't the same as going back. I'm not the same woman who sat quietly through 3 years of humiliation hoping you'd eventually find courage. I don't think I ever will be again." "Is there any chance?" he started, his voice barely above a whisper, hope flickering despite everything. "No," she said gently, but finally, with no anger left in it, only certainty. "There isn't." She turned and walked down the busy street, disappearing into the crowd of strangers who had no idea they had just witnessed the quiet ending of a love story 3 years in the making. Minute-jun remained on the bench long after she vanished from sight, finally understanding what he had lost, not to his mother's cruelty, not to Yojin's presence, but to his own unwillingness to be brave when bravery mattered most. Was Zainab right to walk away for good, or should she have given Minute-jun a real second chance? Tell us in the comments below. If this story moved you, like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss the next story.